For almost 3 months, the most feared mafia boss in Italy had not finished a single meal. Doctors called it stress. Nutrition experts created expensive diet plans. Five-star chefs flew in from Paris, Tokyo, and New York, hoping to impress him. Every one of them failed. Some lasted only one day before being fired. Others left the mansion embarrassed, unable to understand why the man with unlimited wealth refused to eat. The servants whispered among themselves, "If the boss doesn't start eating again, he won't survive much longer." No one knew the real reason, not even his closest bodyguards. Every meal reminded Damien de Luca of the night he lost his mother. She had been the last person to cook for him. The last bowl of homemade soup she placed in front of him was also the last meal they ever shared. Hours later, she was gone forever. Since that night, food had become nothing more than a painful memory. Until one ordinary morning, a quiet plus-size maid accidentally changed everything. 20-8-year-old Sophie Bennett never expected to work inside one of the most dangerous homes in Europe. She only needed a job. After her father's medical bills emptied every family savings account, she accepted the first opportunity she found, cleaning the De Luca mansion. Everyone warned her before her first day. Don't speak unless spoken to. Never look the boss in the eyes. Never ask questions. And whatever happens, never enter the private kitchen. Sophie simply nodded. She wasn't interested in the mafia. She only wanted an honest paycheck. Unlike the other maids, Sophie never cared about expensive dresses or perfect makeup. She preferred loose sweaters, comfortable skirts, and simple shoes. Some people laughed at her weight. Others ignored her completely. She had grown used to both. Her grandmother always told her, "Kindness fills a room much faster than beauty." Sophie believed those words with all her heart. Her first week passed quietly. She cleaned hallways, polished marble floors, watered flowers, and smiled politely at everyone. Most servants barely noticed her, except for old Mrs. Rosa, the mansion's elderly housekeeper. She watched Sophie carefully. "You work hard," Rosa said one afternoon. "My grandmother raised me that way." Rosa smiled. "Good. We need more hearts like yours in this house." Sophie laughed softly. "I only clean." Rosa shook her head. "No, you make people feel comfortable. That's much harder." Meanwhile, Damien continued refusing food. Breakfast returned untouched. Lunch returned untouched. Dinner returned untouched. Even coffee remained cold beside his desk. His doctor looked worried. "You've already lost 12 kilograms. Damien stared out the window. "I'm not hungry. You have to eat," I said. "I'm not hungry." The doctor sighed. Money couldn't solve every problem. Neither could power. One rainy afternoon, Sophie stayed late to finish cleaning. Most servants had already gone home. As she passed the old storage room, she heard someone coughing. She followed the sound. It was Mr. Lorenzo, the 70-year-old gardener. He looked weak. "When did you last eat?" Sophie asked. He smiled sadly. "This morning. I'll be all right." She wasn't convinced. Without thinking twice, Sophie walked into the staff kitchen. She opened the refrigerator. There wasn't much inside. Some vegetables. Chicken. Rice. Fresh herbs. She quietly rolled up her sleeves. Within 30 minutes, the room filled with a warm, comforting smell. Chicken soup. Just like her grandmother used to make. Lorenzo took one spoonful. His tired face immediately brightened. "This tastes like home." Sophie smiled. "That's the idea." Other workers smelled the soup. One by one, they entered the kitchen. Soon everyone wanted a bowl. The room filled with laughter for the first time in weeks. Nobody noticed that someone else had caught the smell. Damien stopped walking. He frowned. A familiar aroma drifted through the hallway. Chicken. Fresh herbs. Homemade bread. His heart suddenly beat faster. Impossible. He slowly followed the smell. Every step brought another forgotten memory. His mother's smile. Rain tapping against old kitchen windows. Family dinners. Warm laughter. For the first time in months, he felt hungry. The kitchen became completely silent when Damien entered. Every servant froze. Several nearly dropped their bowls. No one dared speak. Damien looked around the room. Then his eyes stopped on Sophie. She stood behind a large cooking pot, nervously holding a wooden spoon. She had flour on one cheek. A loose sweater covered her curves. She looked more surprised than frightened. "Who made this?" Damien asked quietly. Nobody answered. Finally, Sophie raised her hand. "I did." Damien walked toward her. The entire staff held their breath. Everyone expected him to become angry. The private kitchen wasn't supposed to be used without permission. Damien looked down at the bowl. Then at Sophie. What is it? She swallowed nervously. My grandmother's chicken soup. It's simple. I know it isn't fancy. Damien picked up the spoon. The room became so quiet that everyone could hear the rain outside. He tasted one spoonful, then another. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. 5 minutes later, the bowl was empty. Every servant stared in complete disbelief. It was the first full meal Damien de Luca had eaten in almost 3 months. He slowly placed the spoon on the table. His voice was almost a whisper. I want the recipe. Sophie smiled awkwardly. I'm sorry. There isn't one. Damien looked confused. What do you mean? My grandmother never measured anything. She always said, cook with your heart first. Those words struck Damien like lightning. His mother used to say exactly the same thing. For the first time in years, the cold Mafia Boss felt something break inside the walls around his heart. He looked at Sophie differently now, not as a maid, not as another employee, but as someone carrying a warmth he thought had disappeared from his life forever. Before leaving the kitchen, Damien gave one unexpected order. From tomorrow, you will prepare my meals. The entire staff gasped. No maid had ever cooked for the boss before. Sophie blinked in surprise. Emmy. Damien nodded once. Yes. Then he walked away. Nobody noticed the small smile that appeared on old Mrs. Rose's face, because she had seen something the others had not. For the first time since his mother's death, Damien de Luca hadn't simply eaten. He had remembered how it felt to come home. The next morning, Sophie woke before sunrise. She stood in the kitchen of the De Luca mansion, staring at rows of expensive pots, polished counters, and ingredients from around the world. She had never cooked in a place like this. Her hands felt cold. What if he hates today's meal? She whispered to herself. Old Mrs. Rosa smiled as she entered the kitchen. Don't try to cook like famous chefs. Sophie looked at her. Then how? Cook the way your grandmother taught you. Sophie smiled. With my heart. Rosa nodded. Exactly. At 8 o'clock sharp, Damien walked into the private dining room. A simple breakfast waited on the table. Fresh bread. Scrambled eggs with herbs, roasted tomatoes, a bowl of warm oatmeal with honey. Nothing looked expensive. Nothing looked fancy. Damien sat quietly. His bodyguards watched from outside the room. Everyone expected him to push the food away like always. Instead, he picked up the bread, then the eggs, then the oatmeal. 10 minutes later, every plate was empty. One bodyguard looked at another in complete shock. I've never seen him eat breakfast. The second guard whispered. Neither have I. From that day, Sophie became Damien's personal cook. She refused to prepare complicated dishes. Instead, she made simple meals. Slow-cooked soup. Fresh pasta, roasted chicken, homemade bread, vegetable stew. Every meal reminded Damien that food was meant to bring people together, not simply fill an empty stomach. Little by little, his health returned. The dark circles under his eyes faded. He started sleeping again. Even the staff noticed he looked younger. One afternoon, Damien walked into the kitchen while Sophie was baking fresh bread. She looked surprised. You shouldn't be here. He smiled slightly. It's my kitchen. She laughed. I suppose you're right. Damien watched her knead the dough. You enjoy cooking. Sophie nodded. My grandmother raised me after my parents died. She never had much money, but every meal felt special. Damien stayed quiet. My mother was the same. For the first time, he spoke about her. Sophie listened without interrupting. Sometimes the greatest kindness was simply listening. Days turned into weeks. The mansion slowly changed. The servants laughed more. The atmosphere became warmer. Even the bodyguards smiled sometimes. Everyone agreed on one thing. Sophie had changed the house. Not with beauty, not with money. But with kindness. Of course. Not everyone liked the change. One evening, Damien's cousin, Marco De Luca, arrived unexpectedly. Marco wanted control of the family business. He believed kindness made people weak. When he saw Sophie serving dinner, he laughed. So this is the famous cook. His eyes moved over her plus-size figure. I expected someone prettier. The dining room became silent. Sophie lowered her eyes. She had heard words like these her entire life. Usually, she stayed silent. Before she could answer, Damien slowly put down his fork. He looked directly at Marco. My mother taught me something. Marco smirked. Oh. Damien's voice became calm. A person's value is measured by their heart, not by the number on a scale. Marco laughed. You've become soft. Damien stood. The room instantly became tense. No, I've become wiser. He pointed toward the door. You insulted someone under my roof. You can leave. Marco couldn't believe what he was hearing. You're choosing a maid over family, Damien answered without hesitation. I'm choosing respect. Marco stormed out angrily. The heavy front door slammed behind him. Sophie stood frozen. You didn't have to do that. Damien looked at her. Double quotes. Yes, I did. No one in this house will ever make you feel small. Those simple words touched her more deeply than she could explain. For years, people had judged her because of her size. Damien was the first person who saw beyond it. A few weeks later, the city hosted its annual charity banquet. Business leaders, politicians, and wealthy families attended. Damien surprised everyone by asking Sophie to accompany him. She immediately refused. I don't belong there. You do. People will laugh. They won't. You can't know that. Damien smiled gently. I know because they'll answer to me. Sophie laughed for the first time in days. Eventually, she agreed. The night of the event arrived. Instead of buying an expensive designer dress, Sophie chose a simple dark blue gown. It fit comfortably. She didn't try to hide herself. She didn't try to change herself. She simply wanted to be herself. When she walked downstairs, the mansion became silent. Even the servants smiled. Mrs. Rosa wiped away a small tear. You look beautiful. Sophie blushed. I've never felt beautiful. Rosa gently held her hands. Tonight, you will. When Damien saw Sophie waiting near the front door, he forgot every speech he had planned for the evening. She wasn't trying to impress anyone. She wasn't pretending to be someone else. She looked confident. Comfortable. Real. For Damien. That made her the most beautiful woman in the room before they had even left the mansion. The charity banquet was filled with cameras. As soon as Damien entered with Sophie beside him, whispers spread through the ballroom. Who is she? Is she a model? No, she's his maid. Some people looked surprised. Others smiled. A few whispered cruel comments about her weight. Damien heard every word. Instead of becoming angry, he walked onto the stage when it was time for his speech. He looked around the ballroom before speaking. Tonight, I was supposed to speak about business, but I'd rather speak about something more important. Everyone became quiet. We live in a world that judges people in seconds. We judge faces. We judge bodies. We judge clothes. But we rarely judge kindness. His eyes found Sophie. The person who changed my life didn't wear expensive fashion. She didn't look like the people on magazine covers. She simply reminded me how to smile again. The room fell completely silent. Damien continued. 3 months ago, I had forgotten what home felt like. One bowl of homemade soup changed everything. Then he looked directly at Sophie. You didn't only save my appetite. You saved me. Many guests wiped away tears. Sophie covered her mouth, unable to believe what she was hearing. After the speech ended, the entire ballroom stood and applauded. Not because Damien was rich, not because he was powerful, but because everyone could see the truth in his eyes. Later that evening, they stepped onto the quiet garden terrace. The city lights sparkled in the distance. Sophie smiled. I still don't think I belong in your world. Damien shook his head. You're wrong. You changed my world. There is a difference. She looked at him. What made you trust me? Damien smiled softly. Because you never tried to impress me. You simply cared. And real kindness is rarer than diamonds. A gentle breeze moved through the garden. Sophie looked toward the stars. For years, she believed her curves made her invisible. She believed people would only judge her before knowing her. But one man had looked beyond appearances. He had seen her warm heart, her quiet strength, and the love she poured into every meal. And Damien finally understood something his mother had tried to teach him long ago. The finest meal in the world is not made with the most expensive ingredients. It is made by someone who truly cares about the person sitting at the table. Sometimes, one simple bowl of soup can heal a broken heart, and sometimes, the person who changes your life is the one the world never thought to notice.